everyone. Welcome to the 25 Ways Narcissist Abuse Survivor podcast. I'm Gina Geller, psychotherapist and survivor, and author of the book. This is a companion podcast to the book with a lot of extras and interaction with you, the listener. I'm going to answer your questions. Hopefully we'll get this into more of a sort of talk show format, but for now we're going to do the podcast format. And in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought it was a great time to launch the second edition of the book as well as the podcast. So let's get started. The first topic is fawning. Have you heard of fawning? A lot of people do it, a lot of women do it, and it's something that we're definitely raised to do to protect ourselves. It works well in the wild with animals, and it comes from the wild. Think about when you see a bear, you back away slowly. Nice bear, you don't want to upset the bear. When it comes to relationships, fawning is, you know it's a bear, but you can't leave because you sense danger, and we use this instead of our instincts, and we don't run. We instead say, hey bear, would you like some honey? What could I do for you, bear? And you try to friend the very thing that is threatening your wellness, your safety and security. There are other definitions out there that you can certainly look up online, but I find that with narcissist abuse survivors, every single woman that has been in that situation, whether you were fawning before you met the narcissist or after, it is something that has to be worked on. And it's simpler than you think. It's as with many things, recovering from it is simple. It's just hard to practice because we're so conditioned to keep doing it. It's an automatic response. Yes, I'm in the desert in Joshua Tree. It's a very peaceful place and a great time to feel centered and very clear about the purpose and the mission of this project. Experiences in your life where you look back and you say, gosh, I wish I would have just left, instead of it's almost like you're sucking up to this person. You're being not authentic. You're being protective, and it's a trauma response. You're keeping yourself safe. There was some sort of viral meme going around. It wasn't a meme, it was a video about this woman at a gas station, how she had to fawn because a man was coming up to her and essentially hitting on her at the gas station. And when she was being protective and decided to stop fawning, of course that man became aggressive and yelled at her and made some obscene gestures. This is the world we live in. And I want to remind everyone that although of course women can also be narcissists, the world we live in is not layered with men going to gas stations feeling threatened by women, or women, as we know, the bear in the woods. Going back to the bear example, we would rather meet a bear in the woods, most of us, than a man, because we don't feel safe. So for the rest of this podcast, and when you read my book, if you're a guy, go ahead and substitute that. But we've lived a life of having to substitute our safety for tiptoeing around the world and fawning for you. So, and generally women are not going to stalk you and, assault you physically. They can, but that's not what this podcast is about. And see what I'm even doing right now. I just caught myself. I am fawning for all of these guys that come onto the web pages and attack women for saying we have women's issues. Men too. Let's just clear that up. It is not the same. It is not the same, not at all. To continue, fawning. If you were raised in an environment where you felt like you were being potentially could be abused if you didn't comply, or even if you did comply, you would reduce your chance of being abused if you did what the perpetrator wanted, then of course you're going to enter adult relationships with that framework of interaction with a man. It could be that you had a mother that you had to fawn with, and so then you also are more likely to have these sort of fluid boundaries around your safety, emotional safety, it's almost like that doesn't matter. Emotional safety is at the heart of fawning, and then above that is your physical safety. Most of the time, let's face it, we're not going to be attacked at the gas station, but we feel threatened as though we could be. So that is your emotional response to say, nice man at the gas station. Oh, he, that giggle, that is fawning. That you're not flirting, you're not inviting that. You're not consciously choosing to interact with that man at the gas station. He is approaching you, right? Don't mind my windblown hair in the desert. That's what I get for being out in the wind. But it does really have a magical quality. Back to fawning. There's nothing to be ashamed of or feeling guilty over if you catch yourself doing it. You're recovering from it. So fawning management 101. Let's get started. Number 1, recognize the signs. If you feel in your gut that somebody or some situation is not safe, you have to be honest with yourself. What's the worst that will happen if you say, excuse me, I have to leave? Let's pretend you're on a date. You're at a nice restaurant and this guy won't stop talking about problems and making wide, broad political statements that you don't agree with. Fawning would be, you sit through that meal, you go, and you know you can't argue because it's exhausting for one, and two, he'll make a scene and start yelling. How many of you women have been in that position? Whether it's on a date, in the workplace, family gatherings. I can probably count 100 in my life, but I'm, 55. So number 1 is recognize when it's happening. And you, number 2, have to start challenging yourself with this question of what's the worst that will happen if I leave? For example, the guy in the date. The worst that will happen if you leave is he calls you their favorite word, a C or a B, right? You can handle it. And part of fawning recovery is to be okay with being called that. Whenever you talk about like high power female lawyers or ballbusters, and they don't care if you call them a bitch, do they? No, they don't. They actually think it's a compliment. So why do we, the frequent fawners, see that as something negative? It's from our past. It's from being abused by a narcissist. They loved throwing around that word, didn't they? Saying things that cut us down and made us feel small when they were getting scary. When we tried to set a boundary, they used verbal attack to hurt us. Fawning would be, you just stop speaking up for yourself. You just agree with whatever they say to avoid an argument. And let's be clear, if you're still with an abusive narcissist, you do have to fawn. That is part of survival. This recovery from fawning is not practical when you're in a dangerous situation. We keep that in our back pocket. I go through the world prepared to fawn because we can't change the world, can we? No, but we can minimize the amount of people in our lives that force us to fawn for our emotional or physical safety. So that being said, most of the advice on this podcast and guidance from the book is to be done when you're not in an abusive relationship. It's when you're trying to leave, you're about to leave, you made a plan to get out of it, and you are recovering. While you're still with the abuser and while you're still interacting and even co-parenting with a narcissist, often you will find yourself fawning just to keep the peace. And that'll come up more later. But let's just focus on these steps to stop fawning. So number 1, recognize when you're doing it. Number 2, challenge yourself to stand up and think, what's the worst that will happen? 3, if something does happen, what is your escape plan? How are you going to protect yourself at a gas station, at a restaurant, in the grocery store? There is help. Even if, say, a grocery clerk, I've actually had this happen. Male grocery clerk slamming my food, and it's really saying bizarre things. And I froze at the Ralphs, rock and roll Ralphs, because people were looking. I just didn't want to start anything. And then someone in line behind me also started almost like egging on the cashier. And I literally was just trying to get a bag of groceries out of the grocery store, and he was going on rants. And no, I didn't say, hey, I'm uncomfortable, because I thought, what's the worst that will happen? This guy looked like he was going to lose it, and I didn't feel like I was between two crazy guys, and I didn't feel safe. So the worst that would happen was I could have been totally humiliated and yelled at by these guys. I feel like that emotional safety is sometimes not worth compromising your boundary. So yes, fawn for safety, emotional safety if you must. And then of course, journal about it. Whenever you get into a situation where you either relapsed in your fawning or you were successful, write about it. Write about what went well, the timeline even. Break it down to where did you start feeling it in your body when you sensed danger from this guy? Where did you maybe choose to not stand up for yourself? And was it for safety, or was it out of a pattern? Because it's very comfortable for us to go back into old patterns, as we know. And the fawning pattern does get you by in a lot of situations, even in female friendships. But you end up losing, because when you start standing up for yourself, the view of you shifts, the relationship shifts, and you no longer feel like you are liked by the person. And so, yes, fawning can be helpful in mandatory social situations with people that are narcissists. When it comes to romantic relationships, you just have to make a commitment to yourself to not ever be with a man that makes you fawn. Yes, you are made to fawn if you feel emotionally or physically unsafe, if you do speak up for yourself. So talking it over with someone, a therapist, at least a good friend, they're going to support you in leaving. In, say you go on a date and you sensed some sort of danger and you went along with it because you didn't want to make a scene, or you wanted to be liked, or whatever it was. Process it with someone. Don't just sit with that and be alone with the fawning behavior, because what happens is you start convincing yourself that it wasn't that bad, right? Oh, it wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm imagining things. Generally, you're not. And it's better to err on the side of safety when it comes to someone recovering from narcissist abuse, recovering from fawning, and using your words. If you didn't stand up for yourself, another part of fawning recovery is to say, at least in your journal, what you would have liked to have done, what you would have liked to have said, and imprint that into your mind. So before we stop for today, let's talk about how you can affirm yourself and build your self-esteem around your boundaries to speak up or leave when you feel like you are under threat, when you're sensing danger. So, and as always, if you feel like you're in danger, it's okay to fawn. No shame in that. We'll be doing that for the rest of our lives, unfortunately. But for those of us maybe re-entering the dating world or starting friendships, or even in the professional world, here's the affirmation. I feel strong. I have the right to use my words. I will set healthy boundaries and speak up for myself when I feel I am being threatened emotionally or physically. That's it. And, adjust it as you will. But if you really are serious about not wanting to fawn, then you have to practice doing it. No one's going to make you do it. People benefit from you not fawning. Think about how nice it would be if no one said no to you. If people just, placated you and gave you whatever you wanted because they were in charge of your choices. We don't think that way. We don't want to be in charge of anyone's choices. So it's kind of hard to flip that around and feel safe standing up to people like this. But it's really about you moving forward and growing and feeling like, wait, if I stop fawning, and this is the number one benefit to fawning recovery, when you stop fawning, watch how healthy your life becomes. it's at the crux of narcissist recovery, is fawning recovery, because you will be less likely to have this blind spot with guys who are up to something and that might put you in danger emotionally, physically, financially in future. No fawning. You feel it, you see it, you say, I want evidence, I don't believe that doesn't make sense to me, I'm not comfortable with this, and you leave. You don't wait to see if they're really telling the truth. No more investigating. That's part of fawning. You are just simply stating the truth and watching to see what happens. Tune in next week for our next podcast, and it will be on how holidays and birthdays are often the worst days when you are with a narcissist. Bye for now.